Story. The missing bracelet. I had always been meticulous about my belongings, especially the things I considered precious. Among them was a small jewelry box, a gift that had been passed down to me, and it held the few valuable pieces I owned. The box had a small lock, and it was something I trusted to keep everything secure when I wasn't around. I made sure the key was always kept in a safe place, away from prying eyes, and I rarely let anyone near it. So when I returned home one afternoon and found the jewelry box wide open, my stomach dropped. I could see that the lock was still intact, but the box itself was not as I had left it. The velvet interior was exposed, the once tidy contents now disturbed. I walked over slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, hoping it was just a trick of the light or some mistake. But no, it was real. One of the pieces was missing, the delicate bracelet that I wore on special occasions. My breath caught in my throat as I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How could this have happened? The room felt suffocating, and I couldn't focus. I was certain that I had locked the box before I left that morning. The key had been where it always was, tucked into a drawer in my desk. No one had been in the apartment when I was gone, or at least, I thought no one had. My mind began to race as I tried to piece together what could have occurred. I checked the lock again, twisting it back and forth to see if it was faulty or if there was a chance it had malfunctioned. But the lock worked perfectly. It wasn't broken. The jewelry box had been tampered with, and that was the only explanation. My first instinct was to call the police, but I hesitated. After all, it was only one piece of jewelry, and there were no signs of forced entry or other disturbances in the apartment. I tried to convince myself that it was just some kind of mistake, but deep down, I knew better. I searched the apartment, looking for any clues or signs of who could have been in my space. There was nothing out of place, no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing that would suggest someone had entered without my knowledge. I checked every room, even the closets, thinking maybe I had missed something, but everything was as it should be. The only thing that felt out of place was the missing bracelet and the sense of unease creeping up my spine. I stood in front of the jewelry box for a long time, trying to calm myself. Maybe I was just overreacting. After all, I had a tendency to be a little paranoid sometimes. But I knew something wasn't right. I had locked that box before leaving, and the key had been securely placed in its usual spot. So how had it happened? How had the bracelet gone missing without anyone having access to the box? I spent the rest of the day going over every possible scenario in my mind. I even questioned whether I had misplaced the key, though I quickly dismissed the idea. I was always so careful with it. Maybe I had forgotten to lock the box, but no, that wasn't likely either. I had a routine, and I always made sure to follow it. It wasn't like me to forget something so important. The more I thought about it, the more my mind spiraled. I considered all the possible explanations. Could someone have broken in without me noticing? Was there some hidden trick to the lock that I didn't know about? But none of these ideas felt right. I wasn't sure who could have taken the bracelet or why, but the fact that it was missing weighed heavily on me. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with figuring out what had happened. I checked my security cameras, but there was nothing unusual. The footage showed me coming and going, just as I had thought. There were no signs of anyone else entering the apartment. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I had been violated in some way. The worst part of it all was the feeling of betrayal. Whoever had taken the bracelet had been in my space, in my home, without my permission. Even if they hadn't taken anything else, that single violation was enough to shake my sense of security to its core. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone, not even myself. Had I somehow let this happen? Had I been so careless that I hadn't noticed when or how the bracelet had gone missing? Days passed, and I continued to search for answers. I called around to pawn shops, asking if anyone had tried to sell a bracelet matching the description of the one I had lost. I even considered putting up flyers in the neighborhood, but something told me that the person who had taken it wouldn't be easily found. I began to feel more and more isolated, as though the mystery surrounding the missing piece of jewelry was a symbol of something larger, something I couldn't quite explain. Then, one evening, as I sat on the couch staring at the empty spot in the jewelry box where the bracelet used to be, something happened. I heard a faint knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sudden sound caught me off guard. I stood up slowly, hesitating before I reached for the door handle. When I opened it, there was no one there, but on the doorstep was a small box. I bent down and picked it up, my hands shaking slightly. The box was unmarked, no return address, nothing to indicate who had sent it. With a mix of hesitation and curiosity, I opened the box. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was the bracelet. It was the same delicate piece that had been missing from my jewelry box. My first reaction was disbelief. How had it gotten here? Who had returned it? I examined the bracelet closely, and everything appeared just as it had been before. No scratches, no damage, just the same as it had been when I last saw it. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming, but so was the confusion. Who had taken it, and why had they returned it? I couldn't make sense of it, but somehow, in that moment, I felt a strange sense of closure, even though I didn't have all the answers. The return of the bracelet brought an end to the mystery that had plagued me for so long. I locked the bracelet safely back in the jewelry box, but the experience stayed with me. I would never fully understand what had happened or why, but I learned to trust my instincts more. The sense of violation that had initially gripped me slowly faded as I realized that sometimes, the answers we seek are not always meant to be found. I had my bracelet back, and that was enough.